Cool. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, and welcome to Blocknative's second community call. My name is Laurence Delisle, and I am head of product marketing at Blocknative. A little background on myself: I've been in the crypto ecosystem for 5 years, working on layer ones, wallets, and dApps. And I am really excited for today's community call, where our aim is to talk about real-time relevant topics in the Ethereum ecosystem and new product updates with Blocknative. And so just a bit of background on Blocknative. We build unopinionated, credible, neutral, real-time infrastructure for Web3. And we've been operating with that mindset for the last 4 years by allowing users to see into the pre-chain layer. And today we're focused on using that infrastructure for block building to enable the conditions for a more decentralized and fair Ethereum. And with that being said, I want to introduce our two wonderful guests, Matt Cutler, co-founder of Blocknative, and Murat, product manager at Native. Welcome.
Pleasure to be here.
Thanks, Laurence. Thanks for everyone for tuning in.
Awesome. So I would love to start off just with a bit of your backgrounds. Murat, talk to us about what got you into crypto and what got you hooked.
Yeah, I was on Reddit when the original Bitcoin white paper dropped, and I immediately got hooked, which was, it just resonated with me. And I knew how money worked because I grew up in another country, and I've been, in the US since I was a little kid. So a lot of it made sense to me, and I immediately started mining and trading Bitcoin at the time. And things have evolved since then, and obviously EVM has come out, and Ethereum has been a huge thing. But the fundamentals of the space are really captured in that white paper even today. So it goes to show how valid some of those claims and analysis by Satoshi were.
Absolutely. It's pretty incredible. Matt, you've been part of the ecosystem for a while now, and you've actually been through a few other bear markets in other industries, and you even started Blocknative in 2018 during the last crypto winter. Can you talk to us about your background, what got you into crypto, and all that good stuff?
Sure. I like to say I'm a glutton for punishment. Depending on how you count, I've done like 7 or 8 startups over the course of my life. My first ever startup was a Web 1.0 infrastructure company that was founded in 1994 and was a 9-year overnight success and went public at the height of the Web 1.0 boom in March of 2000. And then the market fell apart. So I learned the lessons of the ups and downs of the market pretty early in my career. It's interesting. I've been pretty early in most technology waves ever since then, but I was not so early to crypto and Web3, largely because I had just sold my company to Cisco and I was working there as an exec in their collaboration business. And I had a friend who was like, dude, you got to pay attention to crypto. There's really interesting stuff happening. I said, no, I'm busy. He'd come back 6 months later and say, you got to tune in. There's a lot of stuff happening. And once I started to pay attention, this was probably 2017, my immediate reaction is, oh, I've seen the movie before, because it felt a lot like the formative stages of the internet. It's hard to use, confusing, weird. There's a whole bunch of mainstream people who didn't understand it, who said it was full of junk, but there were some really interesting, really smart developers that were working quite hard underneath the covers. This is exactly like the internet. And we know how that story played out. And so I sort of realized at that point, like how unlikely it would be that I would be an operator in the Web 1.0, Web 2.0, and now in mobile, and then Web 3. And I knew I would never forgive myself if I didn't take another bite of the apple. So left corporate America, started Blocknative. Didn't really occur to me at the time that we were in the middle of a down market, in large part because I was not particularly active in the whole ICO boom. But having been through this, markets are going to market, prices are going to, traders are going to trade, but builders are going to build. And so as long as you have capital, which we were able to get, and you can hire a good team, then you can get heads down in building. And the truth is most of the good companies, most of the good stuff gets built during bear markets. So it's a good focus and stay disciplined. So here we are yet again, and there'll be more in the future.
Absolutely. Murat, you also, from the early days were part of, you saw these bear markets. What are your thoughts and perspectives on this new one?
Just another day in crypto, really. I do think that it's a learning opportunity for the expanding ecosystem because I think it takes 1 or 2 cycles for anyone to really get comfortable and understand how this stuff works. And for a lot of people who have been onboarded in the last cycle, it's either their first or second cycle that they're really kind of opening up about what's going on in this ecosystem and how things work and what are some of the important values you need to hold and abide by in your actions about how you go about crypto in order to kind of stay safe and do the right thing. So I think as crypto grows and becomes mainstream, unfortunately some of those lessons that some of us have learned in the earlier days, people have to learn today. But I think it's still a growth opportunity for the ecosystem no matter what happens. And I think it just makes the next cycle even stronger.
Absolutely. Love that perspective. So recently, Blocknative expanded into block building. What was the reasoning behind that, and what's the vision going forward?
We've been building core Web3 infrastructure for 4 years now, all from the pre-chain layer. So everything that happens to a transaction between the time that it's in, it actually goes on chain. And we have the first end-to-end set of APIs that gives builders full control over their transactions on the way. And this was something that I think a lot of folks viewed as powerful, but sort of nice to have, perhaps, or like, hey, there are other priorities that are maybe a higher priority, really getting this transaction experience right for all of our users. Well, along comes the merge, and along comes proposer builder separation as part of that. And block building now as a market starts to exist, where there's a specialized set of actors who contribute a whole bunch of compute to the network, who need great visibility into the mempool, who need the ability to price transactions accurately and to simulate them at scale. And those are all capabilities we have. In fact, we've had for a long time. And so as soon as we became aware of block building, we understood that this was a massive opportunity for us to take all of the infrastructure, all the capability, and quite frankly, sort of the ethos that we have, and apply it in a totally new context, and apply it in a much more context, and potentially even to unlock sort of a new business model, a much more Web3 native business model than the Web2 SaaS model we were working under before. So, once we started to tune in, we all got together as a team and said, hey, how interesting is this? Very. How much work is it going to be to do this well? Turns out a bunch on top of what we already have. And how excited are we to go after it? A lot. And so we've been all in building. We were ready in building at the merge. And what's amazing is the vast majority of our existing infrastructure and portfolio play very cleanly in this category. And in many ways, and we can talk about this, we're just getting started. So we're in the hunt right now. But to be honest, what we're doing is sort of basics for us, and we're just getting into some of the more sophisticated work today, and we're really optimistic about the state of the market and our ability to compete.
Talk to me a bit about that sophisticated work that you see coming up.
Well, so Murat, do you want to share a little bit of context on what we have today and what's coming?
Yes, definitely. Particularly our data infrastructure and how we normalize and handle action data is very important. A lot of our customers hear about it being great, but then find out some of the details and why it's great. Go hands on. Particularly, if you could do a lot of work going into Ethereum nodes and figuring out what the state of a transaction is, and you get some out of the box states such as pending and confirmed. But we do a lot more than that. We add additional states such as speed ups, failures, and cancels, and a whole host of other states. And we also simulate transactions so that you can look into the effects of a transaction as it is pending. And we have a pending simulation transaction state for this. So we do a lot of value add on top being available. And then a lot of this data is used to inform both the ecosystem and the builders and the dApps that people use, but also traders who use this information to trade upon. So a lot of this infrastructure that we've built over time and the services we've provided have put us in an amazing position for us to kind of expand our capabilities and our offerings and continue to be competitive in the post-merge world.
And specifically for block building. So today, we're leveraging this infrastructure to build blocks that, believe it or not, contain zero MEV. That our relay communicates exclusively with our builder, and our builder communicates exclusively with our relay. And we build blocks that contain nothing but public mempool transactions. And we're winning, to be honest, probably more than we expected to, given that state of sophistication. So it's testament to the quality and capabilities of our infrastructure. But for those of you who are familiar with block building, there are three sources of value to block. One source is public mempool. We cover that. The other source is MEV via searcher bundles, which up to now we have not supported. And then three, any sort of proprietary flow, which is somewhat controversial in the space, but it's something that needs to be addressed as well. We, of course, are planning to move and build the most valuable blocks we can. And we are in the beginning stages of testing MEV searcher bundles right now. In fact, that's operational. We're working with a handful of searchers to receive bundles from them, and both to sort of expose the quality of our infrastructure to the MEV searcher community, and of course, competitive, profitable blocks. So if you're an MEV searcher and you're looking to explore distribution and potentially enable strategies via some of the kitties that we have under the covers, please do reach out to us, probably best via our Discord server, but we're also available DM. And over the coming weeks, we'll be opening up access to that, eventually being fully available to any searcher who wants to submit bundles to us. And we're excited to take that next step in the journey. And we have a whole bunch of other work happening, or what we call share the MEV, or value recirculation, whereby MEV value that results from end user transactions can be shared with and distributed back to what we call transaction originators, that being the user, of course, but the wallet they're using, the dApp they're using, the protocols they're using as well. Because ultimately we view that the source of MEV is users conducting transactions, and today they're not aware that MEV is being extracted from their transactions, nor do they participate. And we have a whole bunch of ideas, again, leveraging the existing infrastructure that we have to both make this practical to do, to recirculate MEV, but also to not pollute the user experience and have to explain a whole bunch of messy and complicated concepts to users who have no idea what this stuff is. So we're really excited to be on this journey and really excited to have the partners that we're working with. And as I like to say, we're just getting started. So it's all quite early in the category, but I wouldn't want to be doing anything else than what we're doing right now.
Yeah, I love your point about share the MEV and our infrastructure. And it's something that I found very fascinating when we looked at block building and we looked at our infrastructure and we're like, wow, not only can we be block builders, but we can enable this value recirculation. And one of those, that piece of infrastructure is Web3 Onboard, which Murat, I know is near and dear to your heart. Could you talk to us a bit more about that value recirculation and how that'll work with all of that infrastructure involved?
Yeah, definitely. Web3 Onboard has essentially enabled the powers of Blocknative's infrastructure in many dApps in the ecosystem, some of which include notable ones like Curve, Synthetics, Zapper, and others. Essentially, you can think of the user having a wallet and using a general dApp, from connecting that wallet, which is one of the main focuses of Web3 Onboard, but then to getting auxiliary services such as transaction states, and now previews with our latest preview module, which will be available later this week. In that suite, they're able to kind of get a host of services that they might not be getting wallet today that will essentially reduce their transaction anxiety while they're making a transaction. And we plan to use Web3 Onboard as our platform as we do share more of the MEV, or share the MEV, or getting into share the MEV, to surface some of the information to the end user on how the transaction they might be making might giving them rebates on the gas, or even further than the gas if there's plenty of opportunities available. So Web3 Onboard becomes a key player in distributing the information and the channels in sharing the MEV, and we're very excited to proliferate that across the ecosystem through our dApp partners.
Awesome, thanks. I want to rewind a little bit to a point you made, Matt, on the blocks that we have won, and how we've really been taking this deliberate approach when we talk about block building, where we looked at our infrastructure and we said, hey, we're the experts in the mempool. Let's see how that stands up at the beginning. And last week, we processed 4 blocks that were worth over 800K, which, as a team, we were like, wow. And a month ago, I don't think anyone would have thought that there would be this $1 million minute. What were your thoughts when these blocks came in, and what does it show for the ecosystem?
My first thought was, oh God, did we make a mistake? There's so much value here that, and you're at the core of the network. There have been incidences where other builders basically said their blocks had 170 ETH of value, and that turned out not to be true. So my first reaction was, let's verify to make sure that the values that are being shown here, which was in the hundreds of ETH, were valid, and a little bit of scrambling internally and triple checking, and behold, they were valid. So that was super interesting. Two, it was part of a large NFT launch, and so there were a lot of transactions that had gas prices. Unfortunately, a bunch of transactions that failed, so users that basically lost value of gas trying to jump in on an NFT, which doesn't feel great as any member of the ecosystem. Much better to have NFT drops that protect users from that sort of outcome. And again, our infrastructure can make that possible. That's why transaction preview is so important. That's why some of these new upgrades to Web3 Onboard are so important, because we can actually show the user, hey, the likely result of this transaction is going to be right, and so to prevent that from happening. Also, it's pretty interesting in a relatively down and depressed market. There still can be activities and events on Ethereum L1 that drive such sufficient interest and activity and demand for block space that you can have $1 million minute. I love that phrase. Remember, this is not $1 million of transaction value. This is $1 million of fees. And as you might imagine, there are a number of builders out there who are competing to win that block. We view, again, the fact that we did blocks as evidence of some of the interesting things that we're doing under the covers that make us as competitive as we are. We are not taking in large blocks. So in the block building space, one of the possibilities is you have, let's say, 10 ETH of value in the block, and you bid 9 ETH to win, and you keep the difference. At the beginning of the market, everybody seemed to be either having zero margin or 0% efficiency on their bidding, or even some builders, we never have done this, had a negative margin, meaning they were subsidizing their blocks. But recently, it looks like some builders are beginning to take margin. We think this is quite healthy and constructive for the ecosystem because guess what? Being a block builder is not cheap. It requires a whole bunch of infrastructure, it requires a whole bunch of engineering capability, and particularly operating things like relays have to be high availability, low latency. And so the expectation is there's going to be all this infrastructure supporting the entire network. Well, that infrastructure is not going to be donated out of VC or otherwise funds. There's got to be an economic model that's associated with making sure that's viable. So the blocks that we proposed, there was actually some significant margin, these large $1 million minute blocks. We did not take any of that. We gave 100% of this proceeds to the validators that were at the tip of the chain at that moment. But moving forward, we're excited to begin experimenting with margin and sort of what might be put out there. And we think that others in the category appear to be as well. So interesting times in this interesting market.
Yeah, super, super interesting. And definitely it relates back to our community call 2 weeks ago where we were talking about relay diversity and the issues around that and being able to actually get some profit from it because this infrastructure is expensive to hold up and we're excited to open source things and contribute to that entire community. But things are updating and evolving and we're all working on it together. And to your points, Vitalik also last week, maybe a week and a half ago, released the updated roadmap. And it was pretty exciting to see the Scourge added into the mix, which directly affects Blocknative and other building infrastructure for proposer-builder separation. And in that new roadmap, the Scourge's goal is described as ensure reliable and credible neutral transaction inclusion and avoid centralization and other protocol risks from MEV. I know, Matt, you were part of you were there at Stanford when the whole panel talked about it. Vitalik talked about, hey, like it looked like if we really prioritize PBS, and now it's ingrained in the roadmap as its own thing. Talk to us a little bit about that and what this means for Blocknative.
One, the idea of in-protocol PBS been part of the Ethereum roadmap for a while now, but it was sort of at the tail end of it at the splurge. Post-merge, the splurge was maybe 18 months away, maybe more, but those of us who really understand how quickly things move in this category said, oh, it's probably longer. And then at DevCon, Vitalik said, well, the splurge is somewhere between 2 and 8 years away, which felt like a very long time. And the current solution for block building using MEV Boost as a trusted sidecar has limitations and has risks associated with it. I think you mix in there some of the OFAC SDN requirements, the idea that many validators want to ensure that the relays and builders that they're using are not including sanctioned addresses, and you start to get some complexity and some regulatory capture that could potentially happen. And so we were interested and a little surprised, but also not to see, wow, that this is a big enough issue to the future of the network that we're going to create a new phase in the roadmap, the Scourge, but that's not going to be put at the end. It's going to be put in the middle. And I always say, like, just think about the things like the Verge and the Purge. These have been in for years, right? There's tons of research, tons of activity, tons going on. And the determination of the Ethereum Foundation is the issues associated with the Scourge are more urgent and therefore should be higher in priority sooner in time on the roadmap. Now, again, everybody says this more and more that this is not a linear roadmap or serialized, it is parallel. So work will be happening simultaneously. And so, it just goes to show just how critical block building is to the network and the issues that are there. Two, as a participant in the space, things move very quickly and things will continue to evolve. And it is incumbent on us as participants and all the other participants to both participate in those conversations and to be responsive to the changes. So, I think it just underscores again that this is a vital piece of puzzle and that, we as an operator need to be mindful of the implications of the whole sector and what that means. So anyways, we're excited to see it get that much recognition. And also it tells us that there's concerns about some of the conditions here. We need to make some changes. So it's great.
Yeah. Has it affected our roadmap at all? Or do you feel, hey, just keep on keeping?
I think there's not enough detail out there on the Scourge yet for it to directly impact that. We're very heads down. Builders going to build, particularly in times like this. And so we're much more tactically oriented. We do expect some of that will, impact us. Certainly As we move to in-protocol PBS, you won't need something like a relay, and we have our own relay now, Dreamboat, its own code base, etc. And there's still a lot of open questions about what's some of the ideas that are in there, like how do you really have censorship resistance in ways that are defensible for the network? And not only is there technological concerns here, but there's ethical concerns as well. So these debates are all unfolding. I think there's a lot of great people who are driving those. We're trying to participate where we can. But again, it just sort of goes to show that these are challenging issues, and as much as we'd like to make things white, like they're often not black and white. So it's really a question of trade-offs that we have to make along the way. We are, I just want to be mindful of time. So if there are folks out there who have questions for us about what we're doing and why, by all means, raise your hand, and we'd love to hear from members of the community. But otherwise, we'll keep going. Okay.
Thank you for that. I love it and please do raise your hand. I'm happy to pop you on. Talking about Dreamboat, that was really a conscious decision from us internally where we were saying, hey, like we want to have credible, neutral infrastructure out there and we want to help the community. And so we open sourced that. And that wasn't an easy feat and something that we felt like was really important for the Ethereum community. Murat and Matt, could you talk about credibility, neutrality, and that Blocknative ethos and how that drives our decisions?
I'll let Murat start.
Yeah, definitely. We at Blocknative have been, parallel to the ecosystem ethos, and we very much feel and absorb all the values of the Ethereum community. So, we saw the merge and the upcoming block building space as an opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to some of that. And as many people on this call know, Onboard has been open source for a very time, and our commitment to source has only increased as the merge happened. And we've open sourced our relay, which is Dreamboat. And particularly, what's important about that is that one, it gained a lot of recognition in the ecosystem as a positive kind of contribution to the ecosystem, because it was deviating from the it's a different approach to block building and relays than what's available out there from Flashbots. And so having another implementation out there obviously increases the diversity in the ecosystem and the options that people have. And relying on a single solution is a general no in Ethereum, which is why we have such client diversity. So I think we're looking to continue to demonstrate our commitment to open source and the general ethos of the ecosystem. And we're very excited by the positive reaction we've received from the ecosystem about open sourcing Dreamboat and our relay.
Yeah, and I think one of the things about us moving into block building is very much trying to embrace the promise that's in our name. Like, what is block native? What does it mean to be block native, right? And trying to be really thoughtful and deliberate about operating in ways that we felt were aligned with what we understand to be the values of the ecosystem. So far, that's served us really well, both in terms of sort of how we make decisions internally, but also sort of team motivation, right? It's just more fun and more collaborative and more interesting to work in concert with the values of the ecosystem than to work sort of in ignorance of them or in opposition to them. So we, of course, still have work to do in this regard, and I think it's still the source of active debates. But we think a lot of what makes Ethereum special is the value ecosystem. I think right now in the market, we're relearning that lesson for the upteenth time. That where you have centralized actors, you have the conditions for incompetence and corruption, and so there can be really deadly consequences to that. So clearly, DeFi has weathered the current storm a little bit better than other sectors. It's still never fun to go through, and we really feel for the people who have been negatively impacted by much of the recent events. But also it makes us double down on our conviction that being block native is the best and right way to be, and we're excited to continue our journey in collaboration with our community.
Yeah, I love that. And you brought this up of block native and what does that mean? There's a lot of new people in the space. And what is the advice you would give those people on like being block native and embracing this and coming in and learning from this?
Well, it's interesting. We're not, we're no arbiters of what the Ethereum ecosystem is. I mean, the Ethereum ecosystem is large and diverse, but in general, the idea is to prioritize decentralization while maximizing innovation and maximizing sort of diversity of thought, diversity of code base, diversity of approach, diversity of teams. And so, for anyone who's new to this, I would just encourage you to spend the time to get familiar with some of the norms in the category. They're quite a bit different than what you might be familiar with if you're coming out of the Web 2 SaaS world or the traditional finance world. And in certain ways may come off as a little bit idealistic. And I would say that those of us who've been in the category for a long time don't shy away from it. We're very much trying to build the next economy here. And the next economy is one that we think needs to be vastly more representative of diverse perspectives, viewpoints, personalities, and sort of just where you are and who you are and how you are, as well as far more equitable sort of how it operates at its core. I think as we look at the traditional systems that are out there today, there's room for a lot of improvement, and the mentality is, let's start from a fundamentally, credibly neutral, unbiased base, build safe infrastructure, safe capabilities on top of that, and drive usability throughout, right? Let's always take security first, right? Let's not play games with people's economic resources, and don't trust, verify, right? That all this stuff is open source, all this stuff you can look at and see what's going on underneath the covers, and even though you yourself might not be someone who reads code, that there's certainly others who can do it on your behalf and can say, hey, here's what this code says, and here's what you're signing up for. So we always feel like transparency is the best approach, and an informed user is an empowered user. We build our infrastructure to make that all be possible.
Love it. Murat, anything to add?
Hard to add to that because of how much I agree with it. But generally, my advice to people would be to see some of the happenings as a wake up call in a sense. And I know that because a lot of people are uncomfortable having self custody accounts or something. They can start with $10. So I would say to anyone who holds majority of their funds on some exchange or some centralized actor to just start getting comfortable with it with a very trivial amount. And then you'll be surprised to what that will unlock for your understanding of the ecosystem. So having even a MetaMask with $10 in it is a great start to kind of go towards that.
Absolutely. And you'll be surprised that if you start asking questions and join some Discords, people are happy to help. And everyone was there at one point trying to learn it all. So with that, I know we're at time. If any of this was of interest to you, please join us on our Discord. We're happy to chatting with validators, searchers, dApps, wallets, protocols. We are here to listen. We want to work with you. Anything else to add, Matt and Murat?
No, just that part of being Blocknative is engaging with our community in ways large and small, and this is one piece of that puzzle. This is a relatively new thing for us, doing these community calls, and we're really excited to kick this part of the process off. Stay tuned. We'll be having these on a semi-regular basis moving forward, and really our objective is to share what we're up to, share how we think about it, so that members of the ecosystem can make informed decisions as to whether or not they're excited to work with us. And we certainly hope that you are. So really appreciate everybody tuning in, both live and on the recording. And a big thank you to Laurence and Murat for driving this forward.
Awesome. Thank you so much for attending, and we'll see you all next time.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.